This is the Dallas Prospect Live with DDP. Every legend was once a prospect. The Dallas Prospect is funded by viewers like you through Patreon and PayPal. To support the show, visit patreon.com/the Dallas Prospect or become a member by clicking the join button. Now let the show begin.
What is up, guys? DDP back after a short hiatus here. Welcome back. Things are a little bit out of place. I feel like I'm a little bit crazy right now, a little sleep deprived, but all the same, there's plenty to talk about, so I wanted to come back and run the show once again. So to do that, I decided we need to dive into some recent comments here. In fact, I think it was just earlier today, some comments from former Mavericks head coach Avery Johnson. Because with the NBA still set to resume its season at the end of next month, technically, we're still in June. At the end of July, the NBA is going to resume its season. And with that, you're going to have some interesting elements because with the way that they're shaking things up, you have a chance to, anyone who wants to put an asterisk next to this particular playoff run or champion, whatever, I think it's a little silly to do that because you still got to go through a lot of great teams. Now, if you want to have an asterisk, you're talking about like a team that catches every single round a significant star on the other team or more stars out with the COVID-19 virus. So that would change the perspective a little bit. I did see earlier today, as it relates to the Brooklyn Nets, DeAndre Jordan has also tested positive. So that's another guy who won't have any involvement there. So there's a lot to consider. But because of the mismatch sort of vibe to everything and the season restart, a lot of teams are going to be fresh. We've been closed down for well over 120 days, I think, at this point. Is that right? 120 days? Am I insane? I feel like I'm going insane. But we've been closed down for a long time, so even older teams have gotten some valuable rest. But at the same time, you could argue that some of these guys, some of these older players might take a little bit of time to really whip up into proper conditioning, right? Like you have some of these guys who, like Serge Ibaka for the Raptors, lost a ton of weight during the shutdown. Jokic, another guy, lost a ton of weight during that. Jokic is almost unrecognizable for the Nuggets. So with that in mind, you have an opportunity here where some of these guys aren't going to be in their best physical peak forms. And as a result of that, you could have some of these younger teams actually make a little bit of noise. And when you got a young team led by Luka Doncic at 21 years old and 24-year-old Kristaps Porzingis, you have an opportunity to really, really make things happen. And that's what Avery Johnson believes, because as he was asked about who he felt could really be the team to make the most noise, he couldn't help but mention the Mavericks. So allow me to dive into this here real quick.
What is the team, Avery Johnson, that you are most interested to see?
Well, you talked about scheduling, and you showed it in the graphic about teams with the easiest schedules and teams with the hardest schedule. And the team that's right there in between are the Dallas Mavericks. They're playing, 4 teams that are not currently in the playoffs. They're playing the Phoenix Suns twice. But I'm really interested in looking forward to seeing the Dallas Mavericks. I think, outside of LeBron James, they have a guy in Luka Doncic that's just a walking triple-double. He averages 28 points, 9 rebounds, and 8.5 assists. And he's just so much fun to watch. He's going to be in the playoffs for the first time in his career. And then with Kristaps Porzingis, who's the Robin to the Batman, and Luka Doncic, there's one of the best 1-2 punches in all of basketball. And you put those guys in a 7-game series, they're a team that can potentially sneak into the finals. So when you look at a team like the Mavericks, when Luka Doncic is at point guard, and now Tim Hardaway Jr. is at 2 guard, who's a prolific 3-point shooter, they're very hard to guard. And when you have that pick and roll combination with Porzingis and Luka Doncic, it's hard to game plan for, especially in the 7-game series.
So there you have it. Avery Johnson really high on the Mavericks here. Not just interested in seeing them because it's Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis. Not just because it's both of their first playoff experiences in their career, but because of the scenario, the massive upside of Luka's game in particular, the way that, as he says, next to LeBron James, is one of the premier players in this league. So he's already high on him for that. And then the two-man game that Luka and KP really form takes it to a whole new level in Avery's mind. Now, yes, Avery Johnson, as you can see in the thumbnail there, former Mavericks head coach, took them to the finals in 2006, should be an NBA champion in that regard. He already won one as a player with the Spurs, and then should have won one as a coach with the Mavericks. But there could be some bias there, but at the same time, I think that the argument he lays out is a fair one. The Mavericks are a team that, as a 7 seed for where things ended up, now we still got the 8 games they're going to play through the rest of the kind of rev up before the actual playoffs start in Orlando. That is a different element to consider, but he really likes the Mavericks as a team that kind of flies under the radar a little bit, who could make some serious noise. Now, despite the story a week or so back of Luka Doncic not being in, quote, the best shape, I disputed that in the community section on that, and it was in the middle of everything going on. I think I might have done a show for it. Honestly, I'm operating on like 3 hours of sleep, maybe the past 3 or 4 nights in a row. So it's starting to cumulatively cut me down a little bit. But at the same time, with that in mind, everyone talking about that, it's a mistranslation, and the person who made the quote, Luka's trainer, came out after the fact and addressed as much, saying, nothing replaces in-game shape. Doesn't matter what he's doing here. He's been training relentlessly, but until you really get out there and go 100 miles an hour, 100%, in the actual games, you don't quite get your legs completely under you. That's what he's talking about in that regard. And so when you got Luka with his youth and the way he can impact a game, as he said, 29 points a game, 9 rebounds, 8.5 assists. You're talking about a guy that's nearly averaging a triple-double. Nobody at age 21 in NBA history has averaged the stat line that Luka Doncic is averaging. And he's a guy who, was an all-star this year, probably should have been an all-star last year. He is absolutely a guy who can take over games. Now, there are some factors to consider. We already know that Willie Cauley-Stein is not going to be playing for the Mavericks. That does change things a little bit. As much as you might think, hey, what has Willie Cauley-Stein really added to Dallas since he came here? That's a fair point. We didn't see a whole lot from him when he came over in the buyout market, and we haven't seen much of MKG yet either, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. But Dallas is running thin at the center position, so that is a potential concern. They have KP, they have Boban, and what are we running with beyond that? Just Maxey? I mean, it's slim pickings a little bit at center without Dwight Powell and now without Willie Cauley-Stein. So Dallas is going to have to make some adjustments, because if they don't, it could get sketchy for them. So I'm very much a proponent of what KP brings to the game. He played his best basketball of the season when he actually moved to the center position a little away from that. It happened after the Dwight Powell Achilles tear. So with that in mind, I feel pretty confident we're going to get a good KP. Hopefully not a rusty offensive KP, but even if that is the case, he's been elite defensively the entire season. So rim protection should be good. As long as you can keep him out of foul trouble, which, by the way, Maxi Kleber is another excellent rim protector there. As long as you can keep those guys in good shape in terms of their foul situation, you have the chance to make some noise if you got that. Because I think Dallas, even though they're guard heavy, they bring in Trey Burke, and he didn't get picked up by the 76ers, so Dallas signed him. I like the addition because now without Jalen Brunson, you have an immediate need there at backup point guard. And Burke last year, say what you want, in the 25 games he played for Dallas, he averaged over 9 points a game, I want to say. He was effective for Dallas. There just wasn't much of a role there for him going forward. Well, now with Brunson out, and Brunson not going to be returning for this playoff run no matter what, it opens things up a little bit more. So I can totally understand the people who say, hey, I would have rather gone and gotten a backup big man to fortify that edge of it. But I actually think Rick Carlisle, because we know Rick Carlisle is a great coach when it comes to game planning and strategizing. Whether even if you don't just talk about the championship in 2011 and the way that he put LeBron James in a box, you could then talk about the 2014 playoffs when he and the 8-seeded Mavericks gave the Spurs the run of their life. They nearly, we believed, the Spurs. And that was the year the Spurs annihilated the Heat to win the championship. And that was the first Kawhi Leonard championship, MVP of that. So, yeah, Rick Carlisle can game plan circles around a lot of people here. And now you've given him the time, you've given him fresh young legs that are dynamic talents, and now he's going to have to get a little bit creative. Just like he's done in the past, now he's going to have to lean on, all right, we're basically running more of a small ball thing here. And so just like you saw kind of in that 2014 playoff series, you got to get creative with how you match up. Shawn Marion, that's the one thing Dallas does not have. You can have, if Seth Curry is able to pick up where he left off and have the flamethrower of a three-point shot going that he had before the season suspended, then you have excellent weapons there. But we don't have what we had in that 2014 series against the Spurs, being a Shawn Marion. We don't have that kind of guy. I know MKG is a very good defender, can be a very good defender, a versatile defender. I know Dodo has moved leaps and bounds ahead of anywhere he's been in his career, but they don't have quite the Shawn Marion in that regard, even though Dodo is, I think he's got a little bit of that mold to him. I don't think he's there yet, and I don't think that, whereas Shawn Marion was able to go against Tim Duncan in some matchups in that case in 2014, I don't think Dallas has anything quite that dynamic here. So I'm curious to see what Rick Carlisle does, but Avery doesn't even talk about Rick Carlisle there, and I'm a little surprised about that, because people sleep on Rick Carlisle because the Mavericks have been, largely irrelevant post-championship. I hate saying that, but that is the truth. And I haven't watched the video yet. I saw SB Nation released a video the other day talking about the Mavericks, how they went from the top of the NBA mountain to largely irrelevant. I haven't watched it yet. I can already tell it's going to pain me to watch, but I'm curious to see what they get right. So I'm going to check that out probably in the next day or so. But yeah, I'm surprised that Avery does not list Carlisle, because people sleep on Carlisle. They forget, because the Mavericks did not pull off that upset. They got to Game 7 against the Spurs in 2014, and that's where they got annihilated. They finally just kind of ran out of gas, and the Spurs shot him out of the building. Until that game, Dirk was undefeated in Game 7s in his career, and I want to say he averaged something like, 29, 30 points something a game. Very effective stats, but in that, it just finally caught up to them. They were so outgunned and overmatched that they weren't able to get over the hill. So here, you could potentially have a situation where, because of all these other circumstances, Dallas is able to get out and surprise some people. And maybe they do have a little bit more mobility now than they would have had they matched up before. Because had we continued on the trajectory they were going, we would have had a matchup with the Los Angeles Clippers. And looks like we might still be caught in